with the New York Times if the black protest, or even stop and frisk of black folks, is particularly unusual. I would defer to my journalistic colleague here to really speak to that, but what I think is that the Black Lives Matter movement is important, but it's important when we get our journalist colleagues to get that. And then you have to look at the journalism profession and what it looks like, who has the discretion to cover what they want to. There's one Soledad O'Brien. There are a few people who kind of have her freedom, but there are very few. You know how an assignment desk works. They tell you what to cover. You have a lot of choices. No, I don't want to cover that. I don't want to go to the hood. Well, your check is kind of in the mail. So, you know, and I've worked in newsrooms where actually my check was in the mail.
Antonio wants to hop in on this question.
But I want the professor to speak to the, I know you're in charge, so that...
You go, you. Go ahead.
But I think the professor should speak to these headlines as you teach young people about headlines. What's your take on this? I mean, how can we get the New York Times or whatever the Miami Herald to care as much about us as they care about us?
So I looked at coverage, for instance, in the Herald about the Wynwood neighborhood and the Wynwood Arts District that people seem to think is like the new up and coming, wonderful, amazing thing. And for 50, 60 for 50, 60 stories for the news audience, whoever they think that news audience is, that for 50 or 60 stories, it was about this is an amazing art district. Even the new homeless shelter read as a like architectural digest piece about the open rafters. No talking at all about people who are dealing with homelessness. Until you would think that this was an amazing place. Until a young black kid from 17 from Overtown was in a part of Wynwood. It was shot. And the headline read something like crime-plagued neighborhood. And I thought, well, wait a second, which is it? Right? What is this an amazing place that I've read about for 15, 20 pages of text that came out of the printer? Or because there's somebody who gets shot of a dark skin color, is this a crime-plagued, crime-ridden neighborhood? I think that I want to just be very clear about something. That my critique of people doing or not doing something, of taking action or not taking action, isn't necessarily of people who are already of the like mind, who want to take action or who do take action. There are people in this room who've been taking action their entire lives. Those are not the folk I've been talking about. The folk I'm talking about are those who continue to say we live in a diverse part of Florida, but just because it's predominantly Hispanic or Latino, that doesn't necessarily mean that we're in a diverse area. It means that there's another power structure and another power system. That's not to create yet another divide, but that is to recognize that. And I loved your work. So this isn't anything negative, but it is a critique.
All good.
It doesn't apply here to some degree. There's black and non-black to some degree in this conversation, and I think a lot of my struggles in my classroom in kind of response to one of your questions and how I try and ask students to address these issues in their communities and neighborhoods here is because they're not Caucasian white, right, that there isn't necessarily a problem. Does this make sense?
Well, Luis in our documentary would say he's Dominican, right? He'd say, I'm not black, I'm Dominican. He's in Black America because I think he's a brown-skinned man, and he had a compelling story. I wanted to jump in and before I open it up, and I'm going to remind my loquacious panelists that we'd like to get to all of the folks who have a question.
I'll keep it very short. I just wanted to say that I think it's dangerous to interpret the lack of protest as somehow acceptance or satisfaction. Before the protests around Michael Brown in Ferguson, there had been almost a dozen police shootings and very little protest. And so the Mike Brown shooting was really the straw that broke the camel's back. And it was a reflection of tensions that had been building up, and dissatisfaction, anger, frustration has been building up so long. And if the only way you hear a community is when you see their protests or when you see violent acts, and you don't just hear their dissatisfaction, I think that's a danger, and it leads to what we see.
Great point. Sir, you had a question?
Yeah. Good evening. My name is Gamaliel Duran, teacher of government and economics at South Dade High School. I was kind of going with the language issue on the race issue here today. As a matter of fact, I brought that up today. What Professor, I'm sorry, Mr. Professor.
Just call him doctor.
Doctor, there you go. Sorry about that. What the doctor said, just explain. I always explain to my students today. I even had, we were watching the 30 for 30 film on James Meredith with Ole Miss today. And I explained to them by any means that don't forget ethnicity versus race. There's a difference.
Exactly.
Hispanic people are white. Your skin tone depends on the pigmentation of the skin. That's called a race. Your ethnicity comes from your culture, your traditions, your values, stuff, such things like that, your National Geographic, all that stuff, your location. Now, what we have to recognize ourselves, and this goes for all my Hispanic brothers and sisters here, that we too were part of the oppression culture, just like the white Anglo-Caucasian person. So sometimes we get caught up in blaming that white Caucasian Anglo-Saxon heritage or person with that background. But we have to catch ourselves and mind ourselves and be mindful that we too were brought up with that racial supremacy. Such was the case that we talked about with Dominican Republic and stuff like that. We have an island divided. If you ask a Dominican, in most cases, my sister-in-law, for example, what are you? She'll say, I'm Hispanic, I'm not black. But why? Because that has been ingrained in that culture ever since the beginning of the time when they were colonized.
I love what you're saying, but I have a rule about a question at the end of your question.
I'm so sorry.
But if you just want to make your comment,
I apologize. The question goes with the language. African American versus black in America. I had a big discussion in the last workshop that I went to, and I almost got attacked by a bunch of people because they were giving us a seminar on George Washington and about his slavery, his slave